All right, so today we're going to focus on ratios and unit rates. So the ratio is a comparison of two quantities. We can write this comparison a couple of different ways. We could say it as A to B. We could get rid of the word to and we could put a colon there. Or we could write it as a fraction. The fraction is probably the choice that I'm going to use because a lot of them are going to need to be reduced, and I find it easiest to reduce when it's in a fraction form. A unit rate is the ratio of cost to one individual item This allows customers to compare different size packaging. So you notice that it's the ratio of cost to the item. So we're going to have the money on top, and we're going to have items on the bottom. So we're going to solve this problem. A specific brand of flavored sparkling water is available for purchase from Amazon. The water can be purchased in multi-packs. The options are listed below. So we have a 3-flavor pack, which is 18 cans for $9.99. We have an 8-flavor pack, which consists of 24 cans for $12.50. It already says 56 cents per count and 52 cents per count. So on Amazon, if you are shopping, it does frequently say this. So when it says 56 cents / count, what is this trying to tell you? Go ahead.
56 cents per can.
It is 56 cents per can. So referencing that right there, if we would like to fact check that, we're going to put the money on top and the number of items on the bottom. So it's $9.99 for 18 cans. So when we're wanting to do this, we're wanting to figure out the cost per one can. So if in your brain or calculator you go top divided by bottom, and then I'm going to hit the pause button while you figure out the other one. All right, so then we went ahead and we fact checked this next one, and we have $12.50 for 24 cans. We went top divided by bottom, and we found that it is 52 cents per one can. You know, maybe you happen to like all 8 flavors and you can afford to spend a little bit more, and it's a little bit better deal. Sometimes you're like, yeah, but half the flavors in there are not awesome, so we're just going to go ahead with that one. So I'm sure there's a lot of things to take into account. What does the dollar per count mean? It's the cost per one can. How is it determined? It's calculated by dividing the total price by the number of items in the package. Based on the unit price, which one is the better buy? The 8 flavor pack is cheaper because it's 52 cents per can versus the 3 flavor pack, which is 56 cents per can. A train travels 120 miles in 3 hours. How far does the train travel in 1 hour? So this says that I can go 120 miles in 3 hours. How far can I go in 1 hour? So what you're going to do to find this out? Add, subtract, multiply, divide. They're saying divide out there. They really are. So what is 120 divided by 3? 40. So you can go 40 miles in 1 hour. That's the same thing as saying we drove 40 miles per hour. We're going to practice writing these ratios in different ways. So if it says we have the ratio of 12 to 15, sometimes we need to write it with the word to, 12 to 15. Write it as a reduced fraction. So I would start off with a ratio of 12 to 15. And then I have lots of different math skills in here. Some of you can simply reduce this in your head. You see what divides into both 12 and 15, and you can reduce it that way. Some of you struggle with math, and I invite you to use your calculator. Your ABC button is fantastic. If you go 12, ABC 15, that'll reduce it for you. If you have, on that one, you have the fraction button, and you can go 12 over 15, hit enter, and it will reduce it for you. All right, so I know that there is a 3 common to both of those, and so that would reduce down to 4/5. Written as a decimal, which is the same thing as per 1. So in your calculator, after you reduce it, if you go 4 divided by 5, and here I really think that I want you to use the divide button and not the ABC button. So if you go 4 divided by 5, you get 0.8. So maybe this was a money thing. It's $12 for 15 cans of Coke. That is the same thing as saying it is 80 cents per 1 can of Coke. So when we take it down to a decimal, that is the same thing as finding the unit rate. All right, so 5 to 4 we would write as 5 to 4. Five fourths does happen to be a fully reduced fraction, and so to write it as a decimal, so if you go 5 divided by 4 in your calculator, it should give you a decimal. What's 5 divided by 4? So that would be 1.25 over 1. So if it was a money thing, you would say that it is $1.25 per unit. So I know that putting it over 1 is not always necessary, that these are the same thing. But if it wants you to compare two things, you need to know and understand that that 1 is how much it is per one item. I'm going to hit the pause button and they're going to finish this. All right, the next one says, if the ratio of boys to girls is 4 to 9, what is the ratio of girls to everyone? All right, so it says that we have a ratio of boys to girls. So 4 to 9 is the same thing as 4 to 9. If you guys like the colon, that's fine. I, for whatever reason, despise the colon. I always put everything into a fraction. That is my happy place. If you don't feel the need to do that, that's fine. I can certainly live with your way. It doesn't have to be my way. The essential question is, what is the ratio of girls to all students? So I would like girls to all students. So we certainly know how many girls there are, right? So how many girls are there? There are 9. But now we want all of them. So how many people are there in total? 13. So if we would add them up, there are 13 total students. So we would have to write that as a ratio of 9 to 13. Or if you are really a fan of the colon, you could write it like that. I do not mind. On my test, I probably generally lean towards writing them as fractions. So that is typically what my test would look like. We have a bag that is filled with some marbles. So we have blue marbles, we have red marbles. We have 54 total, and a third of them are blue. Find the ratio of blue marbles to total marbles. Well, first thing I would want to know is how many are blue. So if it tells me that a third out of 54 happen to be blue, what should I do to figure out how many are actually blue? Add, subtract, multiply, divide. Divide? Kind of. What do you want me to divide by? Huh? Okay. All right, so if 54, a third of them are blue. So if you multiply this, so if you take 54 times 1/3, what do you get? $18. So we know that 18 of them are actually blue. This says write the ratio of blue to the total. So I know that 18 are blue. I know that I have a total of 54 of them. Fun fact, that reduces. Do you know what 18/54 reduces down to? It reduces down to 1/3. All right, find the ratio of blue to total. That would be a ratio of 1 to 3. So for every 3 marbles in the bag, one of them is blue. Now it says find the ratio of red to blue. So I'm a huge fan of labeling to organize yourself. All right, so I know how many there are in total. I know that there are 18 blue. So surely I can do something with this to find out how many red ones there are. So if 18 are blue and I have 54 in total, what am I going to do to find out how many reds? Clem, what do you think I'm going to do? Subtract them. So if you take 54 minus 18, what do you get? 36. All right, so we have 36 red and we have 18 blue. Can I reduce this fraction? So I need all of my fractions fully reduced. You can use your divide button, you can use your ABC button, you can do lots of things. What do you get? You got 2, that's right. So we were practicing this on the other side because in a ratio, you do need to include the 1 in your denominator. So this says for every 2 red, there is 1 blue one. I need you to have that denominator. You would need the denominator because if you chose to write it with the colon in this manner, you would certainly put the 1 there. You wouldn't leave that part blank. So therefore you can't leave the denominator blank either. I might dock you a half. I might. The recipe calls for 2 cups of milk, 3 cups of pancake. You cannot always assume that the question is going to ask it in this manner. This is quite frankly why I'm a huge fan of labeling things. What is the ratio of pancake mix to milk? So label it and set yourself up. So whatever comes first is implied to go in the numerator. Whatever comes second is your denominator. So they're both at least in the same unit of measure. They're both in cups. So I need 3 cups of mix to 2 cups of milk. So what is the ratio? I would write it as 3/2 or 3:2. I can live with either one. This recipe feeds 4 people. So when I use 3 cups of mix and 2 cups of milk, it says that that feeds 4 people. I need to scale it up so that I can now feed 16 people. So what am I going to have to do so that I can scale it up and I can now feed 16 people? Huh? Multiply? That is true. Multiply by what? So if this one feeds 4 and I want 16 and I'm hearing multiply, so 4 times what is 16? 4, okay. So if you multiply each by 4, because 4 times 4 equals 16, so you're going to have to take 3 times 4 and 2 times 4. That's why it's helpful to label these things. You don't want to multiply it by 4 and accidentally put in 8 cups of mix and 12 cups of milk or something like that. So I'm a huge fan of labeling things. Let's compare two people's salary. So workforce salary is not always fair. Jane makes $10.50 an hour and Lee makes $12 an hour. Maybe it's unfair. Maybe Lee actually has more experience. Don't know. I am being a little judgy, but who knows? Write the ratio of what Jane earns per hour to what Lee earns per hour. All right, write the ratio of Jane to Lee. Jane makes $10.50 an hour. Lee makes $12 an hour. It says it wants this as a fraction. Your ABC button isn't going to work in this case because you're not allowed to have decimals within fractions. That is not okay. So you are going to have to hit the divide button on your calculator to reduce this. You go 10.5 divided by 12. Well, I just got this answer as a decimal. This is not the answer that it is asking for. It wants it as a fraction. If you have this calculator, right above the probability button, there's this F to D button. So if you hit second probability and you hit enter, that is your fraction to decimal button, and that helps you go back and forth. So I get 7/8. So this basically says for every $7 Jane earns, Lee makes $8. The next one wants it as a decimal. So we already did that. Or you can hit the second probability button again, and you can take it back into a decimal. So as a decimal, that was 0.875. So you could put that, so that is as a decimal, or you need to know that that is always over 1. That is Jane, and that is Lee. This is the same thing as saying Jane makes about 88 cents for every $1 that Lee makes. Write a meaningful sentence using one of the ratios above. So if you were to use that top one, one way that you could say it is Jane makes 7/8 of what Lee makes. Using the $7 and the $8, you could say for every $7 Jane makes, Lee makes $8. You could say, for every 88 cents Jane makes, Lee makes $1. It doesn't say this, but the other day we went from decimals into percents. If this is 0.875 as a decimal, do you know what this amount is as a percentage? 87.5%. Maybe some of you are going to go into marketing in the future. Maybe you're going to have to write a paper and you're going to have to prove a point. So if you were trying to prove a point that Jane makes less money than Lee makes, and you were trying to prove a point, what do you think proves the biggest point? What do you think would catch your reader's attention the most? That, one of these sentences. I know it's all the same. What do you think says it? The percentage. So you think the percentage drives the point home the best? That is a logical response. I could live with that. So this is sometimes why it's important that you can go back and forth between all these different forms of the exact same number. Because if you were to go into marketing, if you were to go into literature, if you want to write a persuasive article, then you might need to be able to use math and prove your point clearly. All right, we're going to finish this up. So per capita means per person. This is usually a per person rate. The population density is the number of people per square area of land. So per square area probably depends what part of the world you're in. If you're in the United States, it's probably per square mile. If you were anywhere else in the world, it's probably per square kilometer. So if something is going to be squared, it would be most typical to put that exponent of a 2 right there. So I have my GDP. The GDP is a country's economic output per person. GDP. That's the word output. So your GDP technically probably gives the world a sense of how rich or how poor you are. So the GDP of the United States, hold on, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions. So that is 25 trillion. The GDP of China would be 17 trillion. Japan is 4 trillion. Canada is 2 trillion. And Mexico is 1 trillion. Their populations are very, very different. Hundreds, thousands, millions. So the population of the United States is about 338 million people. We would like to figure up the GDP per capita. So that means per person. So to figure this up, we are going to take the GDP divided by the population. So the GDP is the $25 trillion number. The population is the 338 million number. I know it's not going to fit on my screen. but you could put this in your calculator. So when you go top divided by bottom, you get about 75,269. So I think that is supposed to mean that each person is contributing about $75,000 to the economics of the country. So you would continue on with the next 4 countries to figure out what their GDP is per capita. When I did this one, I got 12,958. This one was 34,135. This is 55,464. And this one is 11,091. All right, we will continue this later. Thanks.